All right, we're back again with high roller. We just recently worked on this go-kart, getting it high rolling, and there's a few flaws with this thing that were apparent from the start, but the main one that we're going to be focusing on today is our two rear wheels on our live axle. These wide footprint drag slicks have a problem where when this thing is driving, if you don't power into a turn, the axle will try to push you straight instead of turning you due to the narrower profile front tires. The other problem we have with this thing is our right tire never wants to fully seat on the bead, so even when it does hold air, it's not fully seated and will slowly seep air out and eventually separate from the bead again. That's an annoying issue that I'm getting tired of dealing with. Our solution to that is a pair of simple narrow profile, narrow footprint trailer tires. Reason why we're using these is because the bolt pattern, being a 4 lug by 4-inch bolt pattern, is a little harder to source go-kart rims for without spending a bunch of money. And since I don't feel like spending a bunch of money, it was a lot cheaper to get these trailer tires off of Amazon and use those instead of elsewhere. So with that, hopefully those tires will allow us to be able to turn better because there's less surface gripping on the rear compared to the front. And even with the tread on those tires, maybe it'll still do a little bit better under power applications on the off-road surfaces. We'll soon see. But in the meantime, I have to go ahead and get these old tires off, which is going to be a simple matter of lug wrenching the automotive lugs off and swapping the tires out and torquing them back down again. That way, we'll be ready to rock and roll. Oh, there we go. It's not really that much higher than the old tires, maybe by an inch, give or take, so it's not really noticeable. But our rear tires now have a similar footprint to our front tires without making the rear of the go-kart too high. So now we should be able to get the results that we're seeking. Only one way to find that out. Well, so far our testing proved promising, but the other problems that we mentioned with this go-kart are starting to rear their ugly head just as well. The main one, well, one of the main ones, is this crappy drum brake setup. The band, get a little closer, we can see this point here on the band is all twisted and broken, and as such caused this whole band to just work its way off. So I had no brakes. And the other problem that I had is on this rinky-dink steering right here. This setup here that appears to almost be like a piece of PVC pipe or something had this little shaft in here merely inserted in here without any kind of retaining pin or anything. So when I sort of crashed with no brakes, it jarred the steering enough to make this whole thing pop out. Now, I was able to work it back in there and be able to limp back. And luckily, none of this stuff came apart when I was really just running down that road, because that could have really been disastrous. But now, have to make some repairs. So, stand by. Apparently, the previous owners actually had a piece of PVC pipe serving as a tie rod coupler to couple the end from the rack and pinion to the tie rod end on the wheel here. And it looks like they probably tried to heat shrink this PVC to get a better grip around both ends. I would have never known this crap if I hadn't lost brakes and ran into the garbage can, because never really thought about looking at this stuff thoroughly enough to really see that, well, it's friggin' plastic. So now I'm gonna have to get some metal and try to put this together in at least a somewhat correct way, so we don't lose steering when we're actually moving pretty fast. Okay, well, we came up with, on our brake drum here, I welded the broken bands on the end here where they would hook up. This end was on the opposite end right here, where the band would wrap around or hook onto this stud right here. I had to straighten that stud out just as well, but I flipped the band around so I could at least be able to observe the welds here, so if anything starts to happen, I could take action more sooner than later. As for our steering, this steering is set up where the rack and pinion, instead of having a tie rod end coming out of either side and going straight to the respective wheels, they just had the one tie rod here hooked up to the rack and pinion, and this was hooked up with this little tie rod end to the left wheel, and then the left wheel had a whole separate tie rod assembly hooked up between the left and right wheels, so the rack and pinion would still turn the wheels somewhat normally. Obviously, it would have just made more sense in a professional sense to replace the whole rack and pinion with fresh tie rod ends and all, but I guess they felt like they didn't want to spend any money, no more than I want to spend any money. So my solution to the problem, I just welded this crap together. There we go, focus, focus. Yeah, man. I just welded this assembly together using a bolt that I cut up. I put the bolt in this end right here, welded it up real good, threaded it into this tie rod assembly right here, and welded it up, and then just more or less caked down enough slag to fill the gaps between the two pieces so I can get a somewhat solid hunk of metal right here. Also cleaned up the treads on the tie rod end as best as possible too, so the nut that I'll put on there will hold pretty good. Well, nut and washers. So go ahead and get this thing thrown back together. And we can now get ready to ride out yet again. So let's ride out. tests on the go-kart proved good and meh. As far as our brake and steering repairs, that was awesome. All that stuff worked out just fine. As far as driving, yeah, the wheels did what they were supposed to do. As far as steering ability, yeah, leaves a lot to be desired because, well, even without any other variables, our partially bald front tires aren't grabbing like they're supposed to. And I even noticed if I shift my weight around from one side to the other, it makes this huge frame twist around to put all the weight on one tire or the other. So a seat is going to be in the future for this thing, because even without any of the other issues, this thing without suspension shakes the soul out of you. I mean, it's horrible. Your head will rattle and you'll have a headache after riding this thing. The other problem I had too is on our drivetrain, because of the flop in this chain, I'm gonna have to put some type of chain tension around here, because I chucked the chain 2 times, mainly under a power turn. So it appears like the axle might be doing a little twisting when I apply power and try to turn. So that'll be another thing I'll have to address later on with all the other crap I'm talking about. But all in all, there's really not much else we could do right now, because, well, that last batch of crap I just quoted is going to have to be done. So I'm going to leave it off right here. And as usual, hit the like button. Likes are free. Subscribe if you hadn't already, because we appreciate the subs. And stay tuned for more crap, because there is surely going to be more crap to be done to this cobbled together go-kart, so we can make this thing just a little bit better and maybe a little less painful to ride. So I will catch you later. I am going inside for a minute, get a drink, because it is already getting hot out here. I will catch you later.